Okay, so I am playing Minecraft, and I'm gonna listen to a podcast from Tim Ferriss. That's usually what I do when I play Minecraft. I like it. It's a bit of mindless gaming. Normally, for me, I just like playing by myself, and listening to podcasts and getting smart, and playing Minecraft. So, hopefully, the mic picks up the podcast well enough, so you can also hear it. This is kind of just a test, but
It's not a subscription service.
That's loud.
This is what appealed to me, among many other things. I didn't want to constantly be getting dinged by things or have to deal with the headache of constantly getting boxes. It's not a subscription service. Shipping is always free, and you have 5 days to try on the clothes. So, a couple points here. Number one, get started today. Go to trunkclub.com/Tim. Try it out. You get premium clothes, expert advice, no work, no risk. That is a winning combo.
I haven't played this in a while. I need to see where everything is.
Shoes from them, bright green. I do like the color green, and they actually work. I've had so many compliments on these shoes, and more people ask me where I got them than any other pair of shoes I've ever had. And more shirts. I ended up keeping about, I would say, 3/4 of my box, which I did not expect to do. So go to trunkclub.com/Tim and check it out. Hello, boys and girls. Welcome to another episode of The Tim Ferriss Show. I am sitting in a hotel room overlooking the High Line in New York City because I was here for something called Vulture Fest. What is that? Well, it's a very important event for the world of television, entertainment, film, and so on, alongside others like, for instance, the TCAs, the Television Critics Association. And I'm mentioning this because it's related to today's guest. Of course, my job is to deconstruct world-class performers, to pick out lessons and habits and favorite books and so on that you can use in your own life. And the guest today is Vince Vaughn. Many of you know Vince, of course. Doesn't need a lot of introduction, but he is one of the most prolific actors, writers, and producers in the world. He's acted in more than 30 major motion pictures that have gone on to gross more than $1.7 billion at the box office. He is largely credited for redefining the R-rated comedy with his performance in the 2005 hit Wedding Crashers, which set the record for highest grossing R-rated comedy at the time. And he is, and will continue to be, I expect, one of the most sought-after leading men in Hollywood. His handprints have been put outside the Chinese theater, and I know of many things that are irons in the fire that you will be seeing in the forthcoming months and years with Vince, and one of them involves me. Vince has listened to this podcast.
Water break.
He reached out to me along with his production company, Wild West, to do a TV show together, and it is out right now, starting May 30th, 2017. It is called Fearless. That's fearless in parentheses with Tim Ferriss, because the objective is to teach you to fear less, not to be fearless. Big difference between those two, and I could not be more excited. There are 10 episodes. It is on an incredible set with a live audience surrounding us. We use video, we use images, in some cases live demonstrations on stage. And as of May 30th, you can watch the first episode, which is with David Blaine, master illusionist and endurance artist, for free at att.net. So check that out for free. And faux show, you should take a look at this episode of David Blaine. People, meaning you guys, have asked me for so long for David Blaine, and now you can see him live performing magic, getting into his personal stories at att.net. So look for Fearless with Tim Ferriss, and you can find it on that homepage. And all of the rest of the episodes you'll be able to find as they're released on DirecTV, if you have DirecTV or want DirecTV, and you can then stream them on directtvnow.com, and there is a free trial option that you can check out. So there are no reasons not to take a look. And some of you have asked, for instance, and I've seen these on Twitter in the last couple of weeks, I buy one of your books and give you $12 every 3 years, but I've had benefits for 10 years. That doesn't seem fair. What should I do? Well, if you want to spend just a few bucks after watching the first episode, I would really appreciate it, and you can check out the entire season of Fearless. So that is that. We cover so much in this conversation with Vince and get into stories of his early beginnings, how to negotiate his cold calling career, as it were, at least a few jobs that contributed to that, and many of the most important decisions that he made as a producer, as an artist, as a business person, an entrepreneur, for instance. I really had a blast doing this. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did, and please check out Fearless with Tim Ferriss. You can also find the trailer and other things at tim.blog/fearless. And again, the entire episode for David Blaine can be found at att.net. As always, thank you for listening.
What do I do over there? Just fucking give up.
Alright. Thank everyone for coming, but we're missing half of the show here. So without further ado, let's bring out Vince Vaughn. I look a lot shorter in person.
This feels very intimate and comfortable, the white room with the skateboard ramp.
We will be doing a skateboarding demonstration afterwards, which is why we have the curve back. Thank everybody for coming. This is going to be a fun conversation. Vince and I have had a chance to spend a good amount of time together. We are going to delve a lot into his story, many of his decisions and adventures, some of which I think you will have not heard before, certainly many of which I will have not heard before. And I thought we would just start with a little bit of context. So this show is something that I have in some form or another wanted to do for a very long time. We connected initially through the podcast. So I thought maybe if you would want to give a little bit of background as to how we connected and how this came together,
Sure.
and then I'll switch gears and we'll go way back.
I'm a fan of Tim's, and I really appreciated the books as well as the podcast, his investigations into things, and finding ways to effectively get past your trepidations or fears and become able to engage in things in a way that was more fulfilling. So I liked his whole journey and the way that he approached it. So I sort of was like the Warren Buffett of producers, and then I really like to just engage in things that I'm excited about or that I really enjoy, because you do end up spending quite a bit of time on it. So as a fan and someone that was enjoying it, I reached out to Tim and said, if this feels like a compliment to what you're doing and still not taking from what you're doing, is there a version of doing this where we kind of record it with people that feels like a good continuation? And I referenced your TED Talk specifically to dealing with fear and your vulnerable experiences younger with some pretty traumatic experiences, and how that, instead of suffocating you, or maybe it did at the time, how later in life you were able to readdress those.
It's part of the reason that I'm excited to talk to you in front of all these folks, because we're going to get into some of those moments for you, certainly. And it's a portion of life that is very often glossed over and that people don't see when they idolize people on the magazine covers, and they assume that they're flawless, and that perhaps as a result, you as a normal are in some way uniquely flawed, and instead wanting to showcase how people can succeed despite the weaknesses and pain that they might have experienced or developed over time. So let's go way, way back and talk a little bit about childhood. I figured that'd be a good place to start. How would you describe your childhood? Where did you grow up?
Well,
That's age 37.
my hair is starting to get lighter again, so turning back. But both my parents came from single moms, and both came from very economically challenged backgrounds, and so they really had a real aspiration to give a better opportunity to their kids. So I was around a great work ethic. I had an interesting journey in that originally we started off at very humble means, and my father was very self-motivated and was very successful, started his own business and did very well. And then as I got older, we moved into a more affluent area and had exposure to public schools, but good schools and all of those kinds of things. But I think it informed me where I had a work ethic and didn't put a big focus on results, meaning finances were never a driving factor. Not that I was raised that you had to take care of yourself, but being good or working hard at something what was valued. So I think I was fortunate to have, I think you do a lot what your parents do versus what they say, so I was fortunate to have good role models in that way.
What was your dad's business? What type of business?
My dad, his dad worked in a steel mill and on a railroad and had a small little 100-acre farm, but he worked on in the factory and that to keep the farm going. And his mom and dad would unfortunately go in the summers and the farm, and he was the first in his immediate family there to go to college. So he was a salesman. He wanted to make a living. So he started off with Swift Meat Company and selling stuff, and then he ended up in toys. So as a kid, it was a great profession because we always had a lot of toys. He'd have sample toys. I'd get in trouble because I'd go get them and start playing with them. He'd say, "You can't touch that. It's merchandise." That's merchandise, yeah. But it was odd because they would argue and do business in the way that you would in any industry. But the comedic part to me was they were arguing over a Ninja Turtle. You got to put those damn Ninja Turtles on the fucking shelf, you know. But it was. I found it kind of like I was watching Casino, but they were talking about Evel Knievel stunt cycle. But he was a manufacturer's rep, so what would be sort of an agent. They would represent the manufacturers, getting them shelf space in Kmart or Toys R Us.
So he'd be selling to the retailers.
Correct.
What made him good at that? We're going to get into your ability to pitch.
No, but my dad's interesting because my dad is maybe the most honest person. He's overly bright, but I think he just can connect and relate with people. I think he genuinely is empathetic with people. I would see him in deals sometimes, like with a house transaction, and people put down money and it didn't go through, but my dad would always give them their money back. He was interesting that way, so I think people trusted him and felt comfortable with him. In the long run, I think it really panned out for him because he wasn't as focused on that stuff, but he had a great sense of humor and good sense of humor about himself. But I think he is still very, engaged with people.
One thing that struck me when we very first had dinner, this was a while back, and this is actually something a few of my friends who have now met you on set when we were filming have mentioned, is that you ask a lot of questions, which I hate to say it, but has been unusual for me in my experience with, say, entertainment. And you're very inquiring, and I think that helps to build an empathy. Is that something that you developed at home? Did you develop it some other way?
I think I was always curious about things and interested in people, and I like to learn and be challenged on stuff. So I don't mind. I like to ask stuff. And again, as I said, my journey with you started really being a fan of what you were doing, but I was also, I was very inspired by the background that led to you to this experience, because I'm interested in that some very challenging things led to this beautiful life. But there's others who could have had those things and it could have been crushing to them. And I find what you do to be an olive branch and give some skills to others to maybe choose the good life and not be defined by the challenges. And I think that's empowering to people, so I like that.
So for those people who don't have the context, here, the TED Talk that I gave that Vince was referring to talked about a number of different challenges I had, including a lifelong fear of swimming. So I didn't learn to swim until I was in my 30s, which is embarrassing for a Long Island boy.
Share the story as to what led to that.
Well, there are many different components, but the primary catalyst was a summer camp experience I had when I was a very little kid. I was a brunt, and generally stayed away from the playground because that was a danger zone for me. That was where you would just get your ass kicked. That was my association. It was not for play. And went to summer camp, and kids were diving off this dock through an inner tube, which looked like fun. I did that, and a bully of the camp grabbed me by the ankles as I went through. I tried to come up and get air and kept hitting my back on the bottom of the inner tube. They just thought I was going to drown because I couldn't get my head above water. And ultimately, fortunately, somebody spotted that who was a counselor, and I didn't die, obviously, and he to never want to swim, period, even though I was right next to the water. And I suppose this is as good a point as any to ask you about, because you and I actually haven't really spoken about this.
But then later in life, you evaluated it differently, not being the child emotionally in that moment, right?
Later, I had a number of people who were very instrumental in helping me to rethink swimming and also to not denigrate it. So I had rationalized not being able to swim by dismissing it as unimportant. And at one point, one of my close friends, first of all, said, this is a life skill you need to have for you and for your kids. So I'm assigning an open water race to you by the end of this year as your New Year's resolution. I was like, oh, I didn't realize that was up to another person to decide. And he was at the time addicted to stimulants, meaning like 8 double espressos a day. So I said, all right, if I'm going to learn to swim, which is the scariest thing in the world to me, you can't have anything stronger than green tea for a year. And if you agree to that, I'll do the open water swim. And I didn't think he'd do it. And he said, deal. And so that was the stakes. And then someone helped me to rethink how to go about swimming in a step-by-step fashion. And but it was that initial pain, that initial experience that later led to rethinking swimming, which then led to rethinking a lot of things. And it's led to the show, among other things. So
to me, that very story was a great entry into engaging and hearing yourself and how you dissect things and the people that were getting up and sharing. Because I think on some level, we all are looking for those things in life, how to let go of stuff and how to enjoy things in a more productive way.
Could you talk about your car accident in high school?
Sure, yeah.
It's not something that we've talked about.
No, I haven't talked about it much, but we were, it was after school. I had played sports and then I had stopped. I had started getting more into acting, and it was during the day. And I was a passenger, and it was raining out, and the girl that was driving was swerving on the road being cute. I remember her saying, don't swerve, don't stop it. But she kept doing it.
Don't have my laptop open. Somebody said something.
And I woke up in a ditch, my thumb ripped up real bad, and I couldn't move. My legs couldn't move. I had paramedics over me, and I had blood all around me. I was real concerned. My friend, I didn't have any idea how I looked. I wasn't tracking it. My friend was real bloody. I said, is Sean okay? They said, yeah, he's all right. They got me in the ambulance. And then they couldn't get a hold of my parents at first because they were work traveling, and so I just remember being in a lot of pain. There was a moment you didn't know what the ramifications were. I had a small compression, which turned out to be nothing in my back, but the aesthetic
Hey, King
of,
Sauce God.
my thumb being injured, at the time I didn't. I mean, it's now just a very bad scar on the back side of it, and thankfully I have the thumb and can move it, but there's a pad that was gone. So that was challenging because it really made me evaluate the oldest cliche, without your health, you don't have anything. So I really got the experience of feeling like, well, what if I can't move around, or people go outside and play, things I had taken for granted. And then just anything physical that is different than you're used to in a certain way, I think at first it's natural to feel insecure about it. And here I was at that time knowing I wanted to pursue being an actor and entertainer, so it was a gift in processing things and putting your focus on other things, and you started to realize the power of your own inner dialogue as far as what you were creating or not. So there was a lot of gifts in it ultimately, but at the time I feel lucky for it in that it was without real consequences. It was a nice learning gift in a way.
So just to, we're going to talk a lot about that inner dialogue and self-talk, but I want to touch on a few things that are around that same time period. And as maybe a preface to that, I will say that Vince is one of the most consistently curious people I've ever met, which is saying a lot, because my job is to interview curious people. And to give you an idea, we were just backstage getting mic'd up, and he had questions about something called the Marcelotine. So Marcelotine is a choke that's used in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu by the Michael Jordan / Wayne Gretzky of grappling. His name is Marcelo Garcia. So I was backstage choking Vince 10 minutes ago, and there were a lot of very nervous looks.
Very effectively.
Yeah, it's a good choke. Marcelo knows what he's doing. And grappling was one of the first things, wrestling specifically, that we bonded over.
Mm-hmm.
And could you talk about the role of sports in wrestling to the extent that it had a lasting impact?
I think it's important. I think, George Washington, credited ballroom dancing and horseback riding as two of the most important things he did because it gave him confidence physically and grace. And, being a leader, I don't know that you can put grace in the body without, whether it's, I took ballet, played sports. I think it's important, especially for me being tall. It allowed me to have, I think, more control and confidence in my height. And so wrestling to me was really a course in resiliency and discipline. I would have loved to have played other team sports, but I was very good at wrestling for whatever reason, and I wasn't as accepted in some of the team sports. So wrestling is very much a loner sport. If you're on a team bus, you kind of joke around and laugh. On a wrestling bus, everyone is dead silent.
Partially because they're all dehydrated from cutting weight. And you're going to get in a fight in front of your school or people you don't know. It's like you shake hands and it's like there's no one missed a block. You got beat, right? And you are dehydrated. It's odd in that you're growing and yet you're trying to maintain a weight it's especially when you're doing it when you're younger, it's very challenging. But I really felt that and there's, you would come out of playing football feeling like you were in shape, and then you would go in wrestling and you would realize you're not in any kind of shape because if you just wrestle, it's exhausting. And then the only other thing you can do is run. And in the winter in Illinois, that meant hallways and stairs. We had a coach he got fired. He was not fit to be with the kids, but I felt like I benefited from having that personality, but he was a real problem. But I remember, I feel like we need a little more elaboration so people's minds don't go crazy.
Well, he had a real anger problem. I got hit.
This isn't Spotlight. I just want to.
Yeah, he punched me once in the chest after a match. It went out of me. He encouraged kids hurting each other. But it seemed normal at the time,
He was like the Cobra Kai.
Yeah, he was like Cobra Kai. It was crazy. He had his own emotional issues. So we would win a meet like 60-6 or whatever it was, and he would be angry over the few mistakes. And at some point you just heard the emotion being poured on you. Remember, his sister was an assistant. He'd always say, "Get me a tab and an aspirin or an Advil. Go give me a tab and an Advil." And he'd keep screaming at us. But he would sometimes, like there was we would run these stairs, and he would say in these hallways, it was like a sprint, but you didn't make it under a minute 20, you would add another one, right? He was intentionally, you were going to have the bar move, and he was trying to break your spirit. He wanted to simulate all is lost. What you thought was going to get you there is not, and that where you stand, right? But inevitably, the second straight
Make an
time you
episode
made was
of
never gonna make
what?
that time.
I see King
So the first
Sauce
time
God
you
has
would do it,
asked
you'd say, okay,
about that.
name real loud.
He called me bro.
It's,
I'm a
Illinois, so it's either a
28-year-old
name,
woman,
say it,
but that's
my
cool,
Eastern
'cause,
European last name, and he said,
I
he
mean,
was late. So then
video
the
gaming
first
is
time
kind of
you
for
went after
bros
that,
anyway, I
you
guess.
said, come on, you can do it. Second or third time.
I guess my question would be an episode of what? Why me?
Physically forcing him.
What brought you here?
And a few good men. It was terrible. And I always had a problem with authority anyway, and I clashed with him a lot. I ended up just showing up at the meets, and I was good enough that I could do that. I wouldn't go to practices all the time. I really had problems with that. He did punch me one time in the chest. But he turned out to be someone that created a past that was not truthful. He had told us that he made the Olympic team, but that it was when the year that we boycotted it. And that turned out not to be true, But anyway, I guess the long version of it is I think that I gained more than I lost, even with him being challenging in a lot of ways. I wouldn't change that experience. And you can have a great coach, which there are in wrestling, and I think in general, one of the great attributes of wrestling is constitution and grit, the ability to survive painful moments and not take them on in the absolute sense, meaning to have perspective on pain.
Well, I want to touch on the word grit for a second because there are many researchers who've looked at grit and written about it. Angela Duckworth being one of them. There are many others. And also, for instance, I think it's Carol Dweck.
Here's
who wrote
some
a book called
zombies.
Mindset.
I don't see anything. Oh, there it is.
Intrinsic versus extrinsic validation in kids. And so you're talking about your dad focusing on process. And I think that helps you to develop grit, right? Because you don't assume you're a failure if you have an isolated, say, failure on the mat, as long as you're putting in the process that allows you to persist, which I think relates to a lot of your career. But I want to talk about, maybe not the beginning of your career because it's different, but shitty jobs when you were young. Because one other person I had, for instance, on the podcast, Chris Sacca, who I've watched go from having a tough time affording a place in Truckee, which is like a mountain cabin, to being on the cover of the Forbes Minus issue. He's now a well-known billionaire investor. And one of his criteria for evaluating people to invest in is, have they had shitty jobs or not? Like, he likes to see people who have had shitty service jobs. So I was a busboy.
Well, I honestly don't play that much Minecraft. Mostly play Destiny.
Do any particular jobs come to mind?
I had a few of them younger in service industry and that.
This is pretty much the extent of my Minecraft playing, what I'm doing right now, which is just strictly mining. I'm not sure if that's like...
I was old enough to drive a car. I was 16. It was the summertime.
I'm not even sure why I'm making a video of it, to be honest, but...
So I got a job. I thought it was a great job because I sat behind this desk and I would read this,
I guess Bin Spawn and Tim Ferriss make me cooler, maybe.
Competition, and it felt as such that we would all be in a room together. And it was an odd setup looking back. It was a guy, anyone 15
I'll have to think
years
about
older
it some
than
more,
you
I guess.
seems old. That's just how life is. So he felt old to me, although he was probably younger than I am now. But he had a very much younger girlfriend, and she would bring him soup, and they'd sit in the back office. It was an odd arrangement.
Sorry, man. I hope that works out for you, and you can find someone
what we were selling was the
that's maybe a better fit than me. I think
building in Waukegan.
That's a good idea.
Illinois.
What you're doing is
Waukegan,
good,
Illinois,
messaging people, putting yourself out there.
We were selling
That's
tickets
tough.
to the Lake County Sheriff's
So,
Police rodeo.
props for that.
So the fact that the police were throwing a rodeo would really have one suggest it was an authentic thing because the police were throwing a rodeo, right? I don't know if the police even knew about the damn rodeo. And there was a family package that was $20, which got you 4. And then there was an orphan. Would you like to send an orphan? I mean, who doesn't want to send an orphan to an event? It was a time when the rodeo wasn't questioned, the treatment of anything like that. So I was very good at selling orphans. So I say to the family, and my family's not going to make it. I said, but would you like an orphan to go? For $5, you can give an orphan a chance to go. Well, I don't know how many orphans there were in Lake County, but thousands of them could have gone. So I was feeling great, like I'm selling these tickets to the rodeo, to the sheriff's rodeo, in a nondescript building in Illinois. But I got good at calling people, make them laugh, connect to them in some way, and then emotionally hit them up for the orphans if they said no to the other package. And that was an interesting one because years later, at 16, I took it at face value. And years later, I evaluated, in those moments when your mind wanders, I started to question, was there ever a rodeo and who were these orphans? And maybe I was taking money from people on a fixed income, and that didn't feel good,
What was, so the boiler room, some JT Marlin aspect aside, do you remember any of the script that you had to read? Or
So-and-so home, I'm Vince Vaughn calling from Lake County Sheriff's Police Rodeo. It was something along the lines of police are throwing a rodeo in celebration. This, the families are, I can't make a family happy this year. Would you like to send an orphan? For just $5, an orphan can go and enjoy the after. As if like some orphans were going to come out and the other ones have to stay inside the place. The concept, it's crazy that you did evaluate. But I remember seeing as a competition, and I did very well. I think I won tickets to Madonna or something for selling out. But anyway, we were sitting outside, and every week there was a turnover, so the bottom 20% would go, and there'd be a new 20%. And some of the people doing the job were older than I was.
Cool, man. I'll subscribe to you as well and check out some more of your stuff after I'm done here. So, thanks for that. You'll be my first subscriber that's not me, I think. So, always have a place here.
And then I saw kind of the, turning on each other and that kind of side of things as well.
Third place, a set of steak knives.
Yeah, that's right.
Fourth place, you got a fucking fire.
That's right.
Yeah, one of those situations.
That's right.
I don't know if you knew this. My first job out of college was smiling and dialing. I had to sell via the phone in Silicon Valley's big data storage systems, and my seat was stuck in the fire exit. I couldn't even back my chair out. They're like, no, that's your office.
What was your pitch?
What was that?
What was your pitch?
Oh, the pitch. Well, my pitch was a little bit different, although because we didn't have orphans, that definitely sweetens the deal. But it was really doing
It's my home away from home.
Front end, because I had to try to guess.
My enchanting
selling
room
CTOs
on
and CEOs,
in
these,
work.
Large data storage systems to places like American Airlines or National Geographic Survey. I think that's the acronym. And massive at the time was like 100 gigabytes. Oh my God, you can buy it for $50 or $100 with fries now. But I would ask them. I'd say, I read about you. I'm calling out of left field. You don't know who I am. I'm not gonna try to make up a story. But I read an article in IT News Monthly about how you did A, B, and C, and I found it fascinating. I know you're probably busy, but I was wondering, I assume you're using like a Solaris system for your A, B, and C. And if I'd done my homework, they'd be like, I am. That's a good guess.
Yeah, you have a good day too.
And I'd say, look, I have to run to a meeting.
Later.
I'd be like, I have to run to a meeting, something like that. I would love to just send you a quick email. You can feel free to ignore it if you're too busy, but I'm working with a startup. I think some of the technology could be a really good fit for you. And
Pickup artist.
Yeah, the pickup artist approach to selling CTOs. I was picking up CTOs.
I'm really busy, but
Yeah, exactly. False time constraint, no, yes, no. And we're going to talk about your phone calls a bit more soon. But
now, did you really believe in what you were selling?
I did. Yeah, and I did. There came a point later where I didn't, towards the tail end, where I realized, wait a second, like we're promising things, like the sales team is promising things. My friends were mostly in the engineering group because I had to understand the tech to sell the way that I wanted to sell. And then a lot of the folks on the sales team were selling stuff that had been promised from the higher-ups that the engineers were saying they couldn't deliver. And I said, wait a second. In tech, that's called vaporware. And I was like, wait a minute. I'm not okay selling vaporware. That's not good at all. And that's when I started starting my own thing.
Sure.
Because I just didn't feel good about it.
Sure.
Is it true that you became class president because you were academically disinclined but felt that they would have to graduate you if you were class president?
There's a lot of truth in that statement. Disinclined might be a strong verbiage, but at a young age I developed a real problem with central one way of doing anything, and I found myself in conflict with it my entire academic, you want to call it a career. So yeah, I didn't put a real value. I always tried to think for myself, and so there were some teachers who I quite enjoyed and would get a lot out of it, and there was others that I just really didn't engage with, and I for some reason gave myself permission to speak my mind, and I was always, I think, empathetic in that I had a lot of different experiences and friends with different groups, and I was on all sides of it. So I got along with everybody, and I was very bored with school. I didn't enjoy it. I had younger, when I was very young, I did well on an IQ test, and yet I was not paying attention. I just was bored. And I remember they took me to a psychiatrist. They said, "Oh, we think he might have learning disabilities," and I was really afraid. And at the time, I didn't vocalize it, but I was maybe 6. But I thought that at the other side of this, there was a fear that they could take me from my family. So I remember like overly talking in a way that I was an expert on everything I was saying, and that I knew the answers to things. And for whatever reason, in my young mind, I felt like I had to really nail this, or they were going to take me away. and it came back that I was borderline hyperactive. But that's most young boys, I think, like you can't sit still, you're not listening. And so I had that kind of thing in me. So I always loved to read and I always loved to learn, and I just didn't like the process of memorizing and taking tests. I never enjoyed it, and I didn't enjoy stuff that I found to be ineffective, and I felt ethically challenged with playing the game, as if like if I didn't believe something, why am I writing it? Should I not be investigating a principle that's sound? Why am I catering to an individual who isn't presenting a good argument, and why would I just, try to get their approval and play the game?
I'm signing off
really
for today.
Which would lead to confrontations.
Did one round of mining, and now I'm all cleaned up and ready to go next time.
Yes, I was nervous. I had to graduate high school. My parents said, you got to graduate high school. And it was less, it was more about